have the power. You, the people, have the power. Let us all unite.
Good morning and welcome to the FrontLine.Army. You can subscribe to our uncensored newsletter at the FrontLine.Army. You can see this daily show on Telegram. You can also link to it on Twitter, and you can also see it on Patreon. And not only is the newsletter free, but this show is free as well. That's on Patreon at The Real Truth 502. All donations gratefully accepted if you want to. But I would urge you to sign up to the frontline.com. The FrontLine.Army, where you get proper news and not propaganda. We are joined today by my usual host, Lee Slaughter, James Rossi, the wonderful person who drove me all the way to Edinburgh, where we engaged very, very well and found great hope in that lots and lots of people want to join and make sure this world is a better place. And we're also joined by Richard Willett, who works with Iconic. He's a journalist who looks into some of the darker sides and some of the cults that surround these people that are running our world. And he has a unique take, and we love having him on. Good morning, Richard. Good morning, Lee. Good morning, James.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Let's get into it right at the very, very start. We're going to go to Richard first. We're going to talk about DeSantis and the Iowa caucus, Trump and Nikki Haley. Vivek has now fallen out of the race. After damaging Nikki Haley so badly, even Democrat money and military-industrial complex money has not managed to push her up the rankings. But Richard, you have a different take on Donald Trump, don't you? What have you been looking into?
Well, if we go back to Trump, I mean, Trump for a long time, and the earliest you're going to look at 1990, really, and the big thing for me was always that he was bailed out by Wilbur Ross in the early 90s, Rothschild, bankruptcy, manager, basically. So he was bailed out by him in 1990. So to me, if you're bailed out by the Rothschilds very early on, you're going to be owned by the Rothschilds and that banking system for a long time. Now, there's another element to Trump that obviously he's not just a businessman. The New York, I would say, mobster would be fair to say with him. They've brushed him up really well. He even did a stint in the wrestling for a while to learn how to do promos. He was pushed as what you would call in the Kabbalistic, I say we, I'm not part of it, but the Kabbalistic guys would say that he was the Messiah, son of Joseph. So you've got two Messiahs. Messiah, son of David would be the one that's basically the Jewish Messiah that is the second coming. Messiah, son of David is the false Messiah that leads the Goyim or the West off the edge of a cliff. He's the good guy, the good cop. And I believe that that's what Trump is being now, again, pushed as. And we saw with Alex Jones, he jumped back on the Trump train. He's been there before. Once Trump pushed Gavi through, he took money from the World Health Organization. I thought, great, that. Found out 10 minutes later, he's just given it to Gavi, which is basically just taking it out of Bill Gates' left pocket and sticking it in his right pocket. That is basically what we're looking at. And then you look at the Chabad Lubavitch guys that are connected to all of these guys and Trump. So when one of the guys was attacked at a synagogue, it was Trump who threw Jared Kushner, who is a Chabadnik, and his daughter, Ivanka. He was there defending these Chabad Lubavitch guys. The guy that got his fingers shot off that he was defending 2 years later went to prison for fraud. So he's very much connected to the Chabad Lubavitch, as is Putin, as is Milei, as is RFK Jr., as is Netanyahu, who openly talks about in 1990 when he was given the nod, was openly spoken about and given the nod to push their God's plan through. So my take on it is that this is a one big group controlled by the real men in black, who I would say is Chabad Lubavitch at the moment. I'm sure it goes deeper than that, but that's as far as I'm getting. So he's been pushed in a way that he was pushed before. And I find it frustrating that people like Alex Jones are again doing exactly what they were doing only 6-7 years ago. Yes. So I think he's been pushed as the kind of controlled. They're all controlled. So there is no opposition. There's just control.
That's my take on him. That won't please the white hats any, Richard, will it?
No, it wouldn't. We're waiting for them still to come out and do some stuff. So again,
they've not really given us a date on this, have they?
No, again, most cults don't. They'll tell you that the Messiah's coming, and when that date doesn't come, they move the date forward. That usually what happens. Because yeah,
Or as the
um,
politicians would say, at the appropriate juncture or in the fullness of time, to borrow a phrase from Yes Minister.
exactly, yeah. So yeah, it's like changing it's basically they're sticking the sell by date labels on the product and just changing it and knocking it down the line. Although you're seeing it go green and start to stink with inside the packaging, you know that it's out of date. But
Yeah,
again, I mean, maybe there is a deeper element to this, but everything points to the Rothschilds, 1990. The Rothschilds signed the obviously Balfour Declaration. They are the ones that created
State of Israel.
Israel. They
Yep.
created the state of Israel. It is their fiefdom. I mean, again, they're just frontmen as well. I think behind it, you're going to find this Chabad messianic cult and what they want for the Middle East, and what we talked about many times is what they want in Jerusalem, which is Third Solomon's Temple, although there probably wasn't two in the first place. But if people don't understand the Kabbalistic understanding of this, won't understand the long-term plan and plan agenda. And I do believe Trump plays his role in that right now as Messiah, son of Joseph, which is a role. So other people come along and play that savior role, like you look on Musk. He's not specifically the person; it's a role within a play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting take. Somebody who always joined in the dots is Lee Slaughter. With the Iowa caucus that's just gone on and Vivek dropping out of the race, was Vivek running interference for Trump? And secondly, Nikki Haley's a dead duck now, isn't she? Given all the money that's coming from the military-industrial complex and Democrat donors to try and boost her campaign. It won't be long before she's the Dick Cheney in heels is going to have to give up. Is that correctly?
Not specifically, no. What I'd like to do is just talk about the politics of the Iowa caucus and Trump, and then I've got a question back for Richard, actually, which I'm towards the end. But if we look at Iowa and the Iowa caucuses, Trump has won this with 51+% of the vote. He won 99 counties, all 99 counties. And then the interesting thing started, which brings Miss Haley back into the equation, is that one of those counties suddenly flipped or was flipped to Nikki Haley by one single solitary vote, which they're saying is a Democrat that registered as a Republican. You know, he won these, Trump won those counties by significant margins. So to lose it by one vote afterwards, it demonstrates that the shenanigans have started again. Now, the other interesting thing with Haley, that she came out and made a statement, Nikki Haley, that Iowa has proven that this is now a two-horse race. She finished third. So, and here's the counter to your, is Nikki Haley a dead duck? No, because the money that's flooding in behind her is Democrat money. They're looking for a stalking horse that if they can't win with Biden, if they can't win with either Big Mike or Gavin Newsom, that they want a Republican in there that's on their team, and that's Nikki Haley. So I don't think she's a dead duck in the sense that politically, financially, she's a dead duck. She's not, absolutely not. She's going to get the backing to the hilt. I think she's a dead duck in terms of a genuinely electoral power. But you then look at North Carolina and Hampshire, and the mainstream media is already talking about Nikki Haley's support is doubling and trebling from nowhere to 3 times nowhere. But what I'm sort of focusing on is the fact, not the actual result. Trump won Iowa easily, massively, significantly in normal politics. But the shenanigans, this fiddling of elections has already started. The power is sliding in behind Nikki Haley because DeSantis is regarded now as a busted flush. And it's going to be an interesting Republican convention now, because they definitely don't want Trump. They definitely do want Haley. They do want Biden or Big Mike or somebody else. And this sort of brings back to the question to Richard, is with this Trump's association with the Rothschilds, and I forgot the name of the guy that you just mentioned, and the Lubavitch lot. Why are they so afraid of him? Why are they so desperate to stop him? Or is this part of the game?
It's a good question. I believe that's part of the game. If you'll say, okay, the best analogy I can give it, if there's 6 jobs going at a place and you want to control the place, you put your friend in one of the positions of the jobs so no one else can get in there. And I just think it's that for me. Again, look at what he did during the whole Rona thing, pushed Gavi, pushed Operation, what was it called? Warp Speed. He
Yes.
also goes back to, let's say, the Rothschilds. He goes back through there. I don't think they're afraid of him at all. I think it's theatre. Again, I just think it's theatre. I mean, he wouldn't be in the position he's in. He's clearly attached to this Chabad Lubavitch guys. He's clearly got the Rothschild connection. He's clearly pushed the jabs. He's clearly playing different roles along the way, and he's switching and changing. I don't think we should forget what happened 6 years ago with him, and I don't think it's any different now. So they're not afraid of him; they're pretending to be afraid of him. That's always been my case. It's always been the illusion of choice. So when you've got Trump, who's pro-Zionist, you've got Nikki Haley, who that's not even her real name. It's Namarita or Namarata. She's pro-Zionist. You've got DeSantis, who's got a Zionist award from the Zionists of America. You've got Robert Kennedy Jr., who's being seen and controlled by Shmuley, who's a Chabad Lubavitch. You've got who else is in the running? They're the 3 main ones, and they're all controlled by Israel. So forgive me if I don't believe any of them at all, because they've all got the Israel connection. Every one of them has Sunak, Infosys.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It all comes back to this one link, which is Israel and this push for what's happening in the Middle East. And that's why I look into the deep occult level of it, because on a political level, you're going to get your Messiah, son of David. You're going to get your good cop, bad cop. It's a very simple, and that for me is, unless there's, and I'm not an expert with the politics, is probably my weakest element, because to me it's the top level play out of what goes on that is very, very deep occult level. They've all, also, you've got the Epstein connections with Trump. He can say all he likes that he fell out with him, but there was a very deep connection there. Clinton, very deep connection to Epstein. And what's Epstein connected to is Mossad, clearly, and CIA, and he was clearly working with the president of Israel at the time. So these connections are too far and wide for me to believe anything other than just a repeat.
Too much smoke and not enough mirrors. I want to bring James Rossi in here, who's been waiting patiently. James, what's your take on the whole Trump thing?
Well, actually, I kind of agree with Richard Willett on what he's just said. But if we just look at it from the perspective of whether or not Trump will do well in this election, I think if the election is run fairly, I think he'll do very well. I think the American people do like him. I think he probably fell out of favour last time round because he came too pally with North Korea. He didn't want to have war there. He wasn't interested in war with Russia. I mean, the one thing that was certain about Trump was he didn't seem to want to cause wars. And of course, that does affect what the World Economic Forum wants, what the World Health Organization wants, and what the big plan is. And I do believe the big plan is for a major global conflict. So if he gets in, I'm sure they're going to have a little word in his shell like and say, look, you've got to play by the rules that we're setting out. Otherwise, we're going to ruin you.
Yep. Okay. Let's. Thank you very much. My thoughts on this has to be, I think, Nikki, of all the people that you're saying there, the most scary thing, and I get Richard's point very much so, and we'll have a longer discussion on that, Richard, because I think we ought to do a deeper dive into that and yes, do a one-off and have a look and see about all the connections and put them up there for everybody. My personal take on this is I want Nikki Haley out of the running. I think this is a woman who will lead us into more wars than you could possibly imagine. As I say, Trump is probably my favourite of all of the people who are running. Vivek, obviously, running interference is now no longer part of it. As Lee says, DeSantis is a blood. I want to move on now gentlemen, to Ukraine. And I'm going to come to, there are various elements of this, because this is going to be quite a long one this morning. But it is really, really important, because we are being lined up for NATO countries being thrown into this war with Russia, because Ukraine are losing and losing heavily. First of all, I'm going to touch on the Ukraine side of this. So I want to have a quick look here on video. We've got some video of Ukrainian troops surrendering. So we've got Ukrainian troops surrendering because they've got the money. Only 30% of it is actually reaching the troops. Of course, there's money for everybody down the line, but we're talking including Zelensky and of course 10% for the big guy. But we're also looking here, aren't we, at troops who have got no weapons, no ammunition, and have got no hot food or thing of warmth. And as we've seen them, they're just crawling out of these bomb shelters to surrender in freezing cold. This is quite horrific, Richard, isn't it?
It is, and I think exactly as you just pointed out, it's a hotting up of a war between the East and West, and that's a mutually destructive war, which is going to, and at the behest of, as I keep coming back to, this cult, it seems to be Israel centric, to put it at the least. If you look into the Kabbalah again, and this is, I know it sounds mad, guys, but this is what I kind of look into, because there is an element of this, absolutely. So this is what CJB books, Christopher John Bjertness, he's fantastic, and he's taught me a lot about this. He talks about the behemoth versus the Leviathan in the Bible. Now, I'm not saying I believe in anything in the Bible. I think it's completely scripted, and believe what you want, but I do believe it's they're playing this out. I'm not saying it's prophecy, it's a acting out of this. So the Leviathan versus the Behemoth. So the Leviathan is a sea monster, which will be the West, the Navy, and the Behemoth would represent the East, which would be the Arab nations, the land monster, and they mutually destroy each other at the behest of another, and I can't remember the third. There's like an eagle version of it, or like a bird. That bird would represent Israel, this messianic cult. So what they're trying to do is get the East and West to just mutually just destroy each other, and they'll stand back and watch. And that's what's happening. And it's triangulation at its very simplest form. If you look again, I'll come back to Chabad Lubavitch. If anyone do a Google, Chabad Lubavitch, it's spelled Chabad. Zelensky got a visit for them not too long ago. He's standing there with them, looking like a 12-year-old, scared 12-year-old, and Putin has been part of Chabad Lubavitch for a very long time. He recently dismissed one of his cabinet for suggesting that they were a messianic cult, which they are. So, guys, just please look into these people, because they're controlling all the elements in there. You've heard of the Men in Black. These are what I assume, and I believe, are the real Men in Black, without the mythology of the alien thing on top. These are the Men in Black that whispering in each other's ear. So this is the Behemoth versus the Leviathan. This is a mutually destructive war which we're being dragged into, and as we know, and as you guys have pointed out, and you know far more than me about this, at the we're fighting the war for Israel, aren't we, quite frankly? And that shows. We're being pitted against, we're fighting their war for them, and both sides are going to be destroyed in the process of this.
Lee, you've got some very strong views on this. Just talking for the moment, getting back to the absolutely horrific conditions that Ukrainian soldiers are being asked to fight in, with such a lack of everything. This is just slaughter of the innocents, isn't it?
It is. I'd be surprised if 30% was being spent on the actual war. I think the money is being laundered into the Ukraine and back out. Zelensky and his cabinet are making billions, and the rest of it's going back to the military-industrial complex and other politicians who need to be paid off. And for me, what I'm concerned about is this relentless march to global war. We've got Sweden telling its population to prepare for war. We've got Germany now, as the Bundeswehr report that came out talking about Russia and NATO, an inevitable conflict, I think was the phrase, and talking about the Kaliningrad corridor and how that may be a flashpoint that will start the war. And this all strikes me as putting up straw men to see which one they can ignite. And then you've got Grant Schnaps, because I think he's drunk, UK Defence Secretary talking about Britain must prepare for war. What was his phrase? To defend our homeland. That's not the kind of phrase you get from a British politician. That's straight out of DC, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
That's straight out of the World Economic Forum. And he is a young global leader. He's come through the WEF training program. You know, it's like globalist language. And then he announces that the UK will spend 2.5% GDP on defence, up from the 2% commitment. Well, that wasn't announced in the budget, so that's something that's new. But what concerns me is that this is to look at the politics of it. What's going on in Serbia? Well, you know, they're destabilising Serbia as an ally of Russia as part of its entry into the EU. You've got Ukraine that's been completely destabilised and taken over, and it's been sacrificed, and its population have been sacrificed in a needless, senseless war that it's already lost. You've then got Grant Shapps, 20,000 British troops going on exercise in Eastern Europe. Germany and Sweden making the statements that they've made. The US openly, Biden talking about, unless we pass this aid package through Congress, American troops will need to be deployed to fight Russians. This is an inexorable march to war. And I'm not guessing this. You could see it in the politics, but it's also written down in the writings of the Club of Rome and the World Economic Forum and the United Nations agenda for the 21st century. Global war, World War III. Now, if you speak to some of the pundits, you know, on the military side of this, people in the alternative media, they talk about the Fourth World War because the Third World War they regard as the war on terror. You know, you could argue that these are the same things, and it's a march from a peaceful world from 9/11 onwards into where we are. And this is my concern. We're not focusing on what the politicians are doing and saying, whilst they're preparing softly through the major channels of mainstream media to prepare populations to go to war for a war that nobody wants, isn't necessary. Russia is not an external threat to the West. And this sort of plugs into what Richard's just been talking about the Leviathan and the Behemoth. I'd not heard that before, but I have heard from a religious side of things that the war between the North and Israel, you know, and this seems to be what they're trying to achieve. And this then plugs into a lot of Zionist sort of talk in the US about the red heifer. And I don't know about this stuff. The red heifer and the Temple of Solomon. So these things, I look at it from a purely political point of view standpoint and geopolitical events, geoglobal political events. And so what Richard's just said is not my area of expertise, but it chimes.
Okay. We want to have a quick look now. I mean, we know that the money is going missing. Let's have a look, James Rossi, at a quick video here of of Ukrainian soldiers here actually refusing to fight and going up to camera and turning around and saying they are going to refuse to fight. Let's have a quick look at that.
Прізвище, ім'я по батькові.
Лаута Олександр Віталійович, солдат.
Відмовляєтесь?
Так точно.
Всі кажуть, відмовляюсь, коротко і ясно.
Старший сержант Оксанюк Валерій Васильович, відмовляюсь.
Вважаю Олександр Євгенович, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Тесленко Олег Олександрович, відмовляюсь.
Старший солдат Дементьєв Юрій Юрійович, відмовляюсь.
Молодший сержант Шишенко Олександр Іванович, відмовляюсь. Іванко Олександр Іванович, відмовляюсь.
Голосніше кажемо.
Павлюк Василь Петрович, відмовляюсь.
Лаков Олександр Михайлович, відмовляюсь. Горяєв Олександр Вікторович, солдат, відмовляюсь.
Друга шеренга.
Таран Микола Анатолійович, відмовляюсь.
Осташенко Юрій Юрійович, відмовляюсь.
Держан Демчук Андрій Йосипович, відмовляється.
Старший солдат Миколаєнко Олександр Володимирович, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Лелюшкін Віктор Миколаївич, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Почутенко, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Голуб Олександр Володимирович, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Марченко, відмовляюсь. Солдат Грилов Михайло Вікторович.
Ще раз,
Грилов Михайло Вікторович, солдат.
і відмовляюсь.
Так, відмовляюсь.
Молодший сержант Кисіль Сергій Петрович, відмовляюсь. Володимир Григорович, солдат, відмовляюся.
Друга шеренга, крок вперед.
Солдат Савученко Ігор Анатолійович, 74-го року народження, відмовляюся.
Солдат Ворник Сергій Анатолійович, 79-го року, відмова. Солдат Таришек, відмовляюсь. А якщо по здоров'ю є? Сержант Седов Олексій Володимирович, відмовляюсь.
Старший солдат Хістин, відмовляюся.
Солдат Лазарів, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Хвесян Віктор Іванович, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Тарасюк, відмовляюсь.
Солдат Шелушенко, відмовляюсь.
Значить, сержант Вашечкин, відмовляюся.
Якісніше, ну, чітко.
Значить, сержант Вашечкин, відмовляюся.
Третя шеренга, крок вперед.
Косиненко, відмовляюсь.
Боярка, відмовляюсь.
Ім'я по батькові.
Віктор Володимирович.
Старший сержант Лишковаха Юрій Михайлович, відмовляюсь. Солдат Врабі, відмовляюсь по состоянию здоров'я. Юра Микола Олександрович.
Відмовляєтесь?
Дайте.
Ну, вам був зачитаний наказ.
Хто не йде, то сюди, хто
Так.
йде, то туди. Куди я відмовляюся? Я служити не відмовляюся, йти куди відмовляюся? Служити не відмовляюся. Солдат Добиш Віталій Юрійович, відмовляюся.
Командир батальйону. Так, четверта шеренга, крок вперед. На даний час це всі особовий склад, який відмовився. Ви всі згодні, да, виконувати наказ? А?
Ми своїм родом.
Все, ну я ж чого, все, добре.
So there we have it. We've got Ukrainian soldiers now walking up to camera, going on to camera and saying, we are not going to fight, we're just being sent to our death, James Ross.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that. The Azov battalion in particular, obviously has been patrolling the borders. They are being used to go and round up Ukrainian civilians. And, you know, I have heard that if you don't go along, that there is the possibility you can be killed. I think that has actually happened the other day.
2 seconds there, James. You're absolutely right. Let's have a little look, shall we, at what happens to a Ukrainian when you refuse to go to the front line. Let's just have a little look at this video of a gentleman being executed. And there we are, literally opening the door and being shot for not going to the front line, James. That's I think are we supporting this barbaric regime?
Well, we're supporting it because it suits the political agenda of a wider conflict. In my opinion, they've been trying to have a wider conflict and a wider war with Russia versus NATO for a long time. They've been pushing the Russian bear. They've been pushing Putin. Putin, you know, whether you love him or hate him, you've got to give him credit for this. He hasn't taken the bait. He knows what the game is. He's not going to play their game. But there is going to come a point, whether he likes it or not, if that is really what the agenda is, and I believe it is, at some point there will be some sort of conflict, whether it goes tactical nuclear or full nuclear, or whether it's just conventional. But I do see a conflict coming. Grant Shapps, by the way, talking about the defence of this country, we're not threatened in any way. It's not like 1940 where the Germans were at Calais looking across, you know, at Dover. We're not in that situation. This is a war that we created, and I say the West created by moving NATO forward after they promised they wouldn't, by trying to control Ukraine, by overthrowing the elected government and putting a fascist dictatorial government in by Vladimir Zelensky. We created that war. We could have ended it. There was an opportunity for peace on more than one occasion, and all we've done is create more war, more death, and more murder.
What I would add to that is, or not challenge exactly, this is not us. This is globalist government. This is the World Economic Forum, the United Nations. This are the people that have been placed as our leaders. They're not my leaders. This is written down. We know that they want global war as part of a major global depopulation exercise where they're going to starve people, create war to murder many. It may go nuclear. I hope it doesn't, and I don't think it will. I think there is enough in play here to achieve this 500 million to a billion population which they want, and they openly state, and this brings us to the Bill Gates, the George Soroses, the World Economic Forum, and all the players that sit in that geopolitical level.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is a couple of things I'd like to say on this. First of all, we know full well that Sweden was always going to get involved in this, because if you remember many, many moons ago, I did a little thing on NATO and who was causing the war. And of course, we had Stoltenberg at a Swedish naval base walking onto a ship, and in the back was Brian Fielding from BlackRock. Now, what were they doing there when NATO was there? And of course, we've had Stoltenberg stay on an extra year because Sweden, in addition for allowing the US to build a naval base in Sweden, get to nominate who the next head of NATO is. Germany as well stood idly by while their economy was wrecked when Nord Stream was blown up. They seem to be absolutely complicit in this, and once again are pushing it like crazy, even though their economy's in the toilet. We've obviously seen what's happening in in Serbia, and is now going to happen in Armenia, because we know when Heli Arnaud turns up with the French military intelligence, and we posted on this before, when he turns up somewhere, he was in Ukraine in 2020. And now there he is being put forward as a defence military attaché.
We'll know it's all kicking off there when Newland arrives.
Exactly that. And I also want to, but I really do want to dig in on Grant Shapps. Now, I've got a couple of observations here, and I am really, you don't see me get very angry. I'm normally very less animatedly. I said last year that Russia were going to mobilise around 300,000 troops, and everybody was saying, Adi, the answer's going to be over by Christmas. And I said that it won't happen until late spring, and they have no interest in taking it, because I have Russian sources that told me that. Now we're being told by Grant Shapps that they're going to go into Germany and into Poland and attack somewhere else, which is absolute nonsense. He's
bullshit.
He's talking rubbish. While we're also on that subject, he also turned around and said that 50% of the territory that Russia held has now been taken back by Ukraine. What an absolute nonsense that is. They've actually lost 7% of the territory. And I did an analogy yesterday. If you take a football field and you take both teams, you take both the linesman, and you take the referee, and you take the managers of each team, then you get them to lay down in that football field. That is basically per area how many men they've lost. And of course, they took a lot of ground and then lost it all. So there's thousands that have died. But just to give you an analogy, if you fill a football field with those people, for each piece of ground they fought over that size, they've lost around 29 to 30 men on average. The other thing I want to get onto here with Grant Shapps, this just takes the cake and really boils my kettle. He's turned around and said that the conflict in Gaza is nothing to do with the Houthis, and it's thousands of kilometers away, and therefore nobody should be getting involved. Well, excuse me, could you tell me what the Royal Navy are doing thousands and thousands of miles away, getting involved in a conflict? This guy is a piece of work, isn't he? Richard first, then Lou.
And I want to stress, it's separate from the situation in Israel, Gaza. It's 2,600 kilometers away. That is the distance involved here. So the idea that the Houthis are sometimes, so this is a very distinct action, and as I said before, we'll wait to see what happens next.
Well, yeah, absolutely is. And let's have a look into some of the things he said. I mean, the Koenig leads back to the Middle East. He says somehow he's very much Jewish. Obviously, anyone can be Jewish nowadays. Well, you can anyway, because it's a faith. So they contradict themselves there. So he says, this is Grant Shapps. I suspect I have a relationship with my religion, which seems slightly weird to people who don't understand me. The 41-year-old says, I feel totally Jewish, not partly Jewish, totally. I am totally Jewish. I don't eat pork. We only buy kosher meat, and we don't mix meat and milk. That'll do it. I like being Jewish, and I'm married to a Jewish girl. Again, it's a faith. These people, at the very best, will be Ashkenazim, which means they are not Semitic in any way, shape, or form, obviously. He says all of that makes me seem as though I'm quite observant, but actually the flip side is that I don't know if there is a God or not. But one thing I am certainly certain is that God wouldn't care if you were Jewish or Christian or Muslim, which is really insightful. You think, okay, well, that sounds fair. Well, it does if you want a one world religion. And remember what these people are doing. His relationship with Israel and Zionism. So to get this guy was, in my youth, I was the president of the largest Jewish youth organization, BBYO. At the time, it wasn't a Zionist organization, so I always thought I was non-Zionist. A Zionist until I got a load of money.
Thought he was. No, he's not
Yeah, he thought he was. I'm not sure. However, he acknowledged that his views have changed over time, and so did his bank balance. I have probably become a lot more Zionist than I used to be, he says. Jews have a history of being persecuted over a long, long period of time, so I think it is absolutely right to have a... Yeah, but I mean, again, what do you mean by Jews? It's not a catch-all term. You've got Ashkenazi, Sephardic, you've got Kabbalistic. What do they believe? Because they all believe different things. Like everyone, they interpret these texts and they read different texts. Some of them in tunnels in New York. It's again. So he's a Zionist. So why do we have to keep coming back to this pro-Zionists? Again, the Rothschilds created Zionism. It's a political arm of this Kabbalistic cult that believe in Solomon's temple, the red heifer, as you guys were saying, as Lee was saying a little while ago, is their offering. They need a red heifer. They've already created one out of what do you call it? Cloning, really. So the Solomon's Temple project's been going for ages. So that's going to be basically the Muslim, and the mosque is going to be taken down, and the Solomon's Temple is going to be put there. That's going to be well, exactly. So that's where it's going to end. They need to do this, guys, by 2240, which sounds like ages away, but it's not. It's a few generations. They believe, again, they don't actually worship Yahweh. They pretend to worship Yahweh. The deep Kabbalistic thoughts. Most Jewish people do, obviously, but actually, what they were doing they were actually using Yahweh as a code or a cover for Seth Tython. Seth Tython is Set. It's the devil, the demon. So they couldn't openly worship Yahweh. Seth. But if you look at the descriptions of Yahweh in the Kabbalistic terms, it's clearly Seth Tython, which is quite funny because it's got an arse head, which I thought was hilarious. So your God's an arse head and not an ass head. But that's what it is. It's the same character. So they are pretending. They hate Yahweh. And what they want is in Solomon's temple, they want Shekinah, which is the female aspect of Yahweh. Their God, sorry. So you've got the male aspect Yahweh, female aspect Shekinah to join together. So basically, Yahweh is an angry, angry man because Shekinah disappeared and was annoyed at him. They want her to come back and have it off with him. So he's calmed down. And whilst he's calmed down, after they've had it off and he's half asleep, Set will come in, Seth Tython, the Antichrist, and take him out because they're scared of him and they hate him. This is a very complex, Kabbalistic, twisted tale that goes back thousands of years. But this is what these guys are actually pushing forward. So imagine what these lunatics will do if you give them a bunch of nukes.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea, no.
Lee, talk to me of Grant Shapps and talk to me about mercenary soldiers who are being targeted in Ukraine because they're actually being tracked from the moment they leave our shores to go and fight there.
Yeah, well, Shapps first. Shapps is probably one of the least qualified people in the country to be Defence Secretary. He has no experience. He's got no background. He is just a pen pusher. And with Richard's description, there are too many of these people being found in positions of power and authority in administrations across the West. And you look at Anthony Blinken and co, West exec in the Biden administration. So these people need to be deselected. They need people to campaign to get them removed from office, to be removed from power and removed as MPs because they are dangerous. And you look at Germany, Sweden, the UK, the United States, what's happening in Serbia, France, some of the messaging coming out of France. This is it's a sprint to war at the moment, and we need to stop this.
Yep.
With regard to the mercs in Ukraine, between the Azov battalions, who are supposed to be these super Nazi troops that are going to liberate Ukraine and take on Russia. Well, why are they not in the combat zones? Why are they patrolling the borders? And why are they arresting other Ukrainians to force them into the frontline units? And then with the mercs, tracker merc, I think is the reference we had earlier.
Yep.
But the Russians are tracking, identifying mercenaries as they arrive in Ukraine and targeting them specifically now. So, why would you go? Firstly, you're fighting the wrong war. You're fighting somebody else's conflict at a political level, religious level, even that is not even on your radar. It's not even in your sphere of understanding. So why are you going? And then you're going to get targeted. You're going to get given the worst jobs to do because the Ukrainian military is incapable now of mounting any kind of structured, professional military offensive. This is you'd have to be mad to go to the Ukraine now as a mercenary, and because you are going to be targeted. You're going to get the worst treatment when you're captured. If you even survive getting captured.
It's an execution. Let me just bring James Rossi in here quickly. James, there's also we've got clear evidence of Ukrainians killing merc soldiers themselves for not only for equipment but for money as well. This is crazy, isn't it? I mean, the moment you get there, you've got these people tracking you, and there's spies inside Ukraine showing the Russians exactly where the hotels and the restaurants that these mercenaries, first of all, which always staggers me as a professional soldier, you go under the radar. You certainly don't hang around with other mercs and start taking selfies or eating out at restaurants. The craziness of this, I mean, they don't even want you there. The Russians would rather kill you than fellow Slavs, and the Ukrainians would rather kill you than Russians. Going as a mercenary soldier, and we'll also put in these trainers as well. For me, trainers are the cowards who turn up. They do a bit of work, grab a bunch of money, and then they send you off to die while they skedaddle back to the US or whatever and claim that they were all a war veteran. These people, James, the people egging them on, like Grant Shapps and like this Trusted, people egging people on to go and help, they're just putting people up to be slaughtered, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. There's been a lot of controversy with the mercs. I mean, when you go to Ukraine, you're an absolute idiot if you put it out there on social media. And you sort of take photographs. Hang on a minute, 1 sec. Sorry about that, I lost you for a sec. Yeah. So if when you put it out there on social media, you're an idiot. You're making yourself a target. Ukrainians, the issue there with Ukrainians shooting mercs, I think, is because some of the mercs go there, they get on the front line, they realise they haven't got the right equipment, they haven't got the right weaponry, they've not got enough ammunition. They're basically lambs to the slaughter, and some of them try and get out of it, and they are executed for that. The other downside, as you said, is if you surrender, you're a merc. You're not considered the same as a Ukrainian soldier, and that's the same everywhere. That's the same everywhere. If you're a merc in the Middle East, if you're a merc in Asia, if you're a merc in Africa, wherever you're a merc, the rules of war do not necessarily apply the same way. Talking about Grant Shapps, one thing I'd like to say is when he's talking about they're defending the shipping, and that's why they're bombing Houthis. It's aggression based on the grounds that they're defending, the international community, the international shipping, etc. Where's the defence for the 23,000 dead Palestinians, civilians? More than 10,000 of which are children. And every day, well over 100 children are dying there. And the leading cause of that death isn't necessarily bombing. The leading cause now is non-communicable diseases. So we don't care about that, but we do care about a couple of boats that are stopped by the Houthis. I'm only bringing this into it because the whole thing's connected. It's all part of the bigger plan.
All of these things are connected.
It's an absolute embarrassment.
And I'll come to, we'll go around their houses now on this one. Let's first of all, let's just have a look at the scale of devastation in Gaza.
برتضخ ده حمدان لك الكتف صاحب لي
سيدة شوي شوي سوي له درع
And there we go. That's how horrific it is. This is ethnic cleansing on a huge scale, isn't it? And for Grant chaps to say...
both of these conflicts are ethnic cleansing now. Both of these conflicts are just total crimes against humanity.
Lee, why are the Royal Navy, if we shouldn't be connecting Gaza to the Houthis because it's thousands of miles away, why the hell are the Royal Navy sailing all that way to get involved? Talk to me about that, Lee.
Oh, well, this goes to something James alluded to, our international obligations. But who set those obligations? Grant Shapps in an article this morning talked about preparing Britain for war and defending our homeland, not the kind of language that a British minister would use historically. He's talked about enemies gathering around us. Well, why? Who? Why would they do that? I mean, and who's actually gathering around the UK or the West or NATO? It's NATO that's being the aggressor here, not Russia. Israel is being the aggressor, not the Palestinians. I'm not a fan, I'm not a supporter of Palestine, but I am bang against the murdering, killing, and targeting of women and children, non-combatants. And that's it plays into the same value chain as the Mercs. You look at what the Royal Navy's floating around in the Gulf. We're floating around Taiwan with the Americans if we're not floating around the Gulf. These things are all connected. Everything is connected. It's one big plan that's coming to fruition. It's been directed and led by the World Economic Forum and the politicians that they've put in place. The devastation in Gaza, the murder of women and children in Gaza, the murder of women and children and the targeting of civilians in the Ukraine, as we've just touched on all the way through this and previously. These are actions to desensitize people, to prepare us for war. And now you're seeing the next phase of this. We've started with Gaza, we've started with Ukraine, so we've started with Gaza, we're floating around with the Houthis. I think President Putin is the only reason that Iran and Hezbollah have not got involved in this. I think there's a calming hand on the background trying to manage this situation, this global situation. I may be wrong, but that's the way I see things. I see it because of events as much as a set of events. Yeah. And with the Europeans now, Germany, Sweden, Britain, France to a lesser extent, openly talking about war and preparing for war.
France to a lesser extent, Lee, but very, very much involved at the very forefront.
Absolutely involved at the front line, but at a political level, they're dragging their feet a little bit in the comparison to the British government, the German government, the Swedish government now, and others. And so this is an inexorable march to war, which needs to be highlighted and stopped. The Gaza conflict is just sheer conflict and totally unnecessary, totally scripted, and totally they're two dots on a global scale that this Sweden, Germany, UK, it's preparation for what comes next.
Yeah,
people have got to start calling this out.
Absolutely. And talking of calling things out, we have to call out, and I'm going to go to Richard next on this one, and then to James. We're going to call this out. Israel turned around and denied that they used human shields. And let's have a look at Israel doing exactly just that, shall we, in the Gaza Strip. There we go, Richard. There you have a guy hiding behind, obviously, a hostage or a prisoner or a civilian, and marching him towards an area whilst pointing a gun at his back and using him as a human shield. This stuff is undeniable, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think people need to see it on a big level, so a bigger level than that, and zoom out and say we're all being used as human shields. If you look at what James was just saying about the Mercs being sent over, they're human shields. What's the difference? It's sort of just a different way of looking at it. They are human shields. They're being sent to the front line to fight other people's wars. And I think if we look at this, there's 95% of the planet is being used as human shields to fight. And I keep coming back to this messianic agenda that's been around, and this goes back 2,500 years at the very least. So it's written in the biblical text, and again, they didn't come from Mount Sinai. They were written as an agenda and a plan, and people are playing this stuff out. Obviously, it's not as smooth as that, but again, everybody's a human shield. We're human shields for this fucking lunatic, and excuse my language, but it is a lunatic thing to be. And the main thing, I know what I talk about sounds out there, but remember, these are lunatics. So they would believe they want to recreate.
You investigate these things, Richard. We just give you a platform to tell everybody they can go away and have a look at for themselves, and they can decide whether they think it's correct or not. But what you're doing is pointing out what they believe.
I think we should also look at the consistencies between how Richard represents this and how the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, have written it down for us.
Yep, yeah. We'll have a look at the book for it's a Club of Rome book, and it was called The First Global Revolution. And in there, it said it was quoted, and you can find the quote. It says, "The most dangerous threat to humanity is humanity itself."
Yeah,
that says all you need to know. And by humanity, this cult means the Goyim. It means us. They don't see themselves as us. At the very deepest core level, there's two bloodlines here. So when David Icke talks about the reptilians and stuff, make of that what you will. But the two bloodline, it comes all the way back from the biblical text. There's two bloodlines. There's a serpentine bloodline, which is their bloodline, and there's our bloodlines. And there is two bloodlines there. And actually, that has some real play out in the real world. My partner has R negative blood. So for us to have our child, both our children, we've had to have a certain medication so that it doesn't destroy itself. The blood types don't poison themselves. So there are two blood types here. And I think we need to start being grown-ups about this and having a look at this stuff, because even if we don't believe it, there's evidence of it. And I'd like to come back to Blinken just for a second. So you mentioned Blinken there, Lee. Anthony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, his stepfather was Samuel Pizarro. He was a lawyer and longtime friend of Robert Maxwell.
Wow.
There's some circularity.
Yeah, it tells you everything you need to know. James Rossi, the atrocities that are going on and Israel killing civilians and killing men, women and children, this is Zionist lunacy, isn't it?
Yes, I think Richard hit the nail on the head, although he put it in a more religious context. But I've said it for a very long time in lots of my videos. You look at my videos on TikTok, you'll see it regularly mentioned. There's a lot of things in play here, you know, with the world and what's going on in the world and a wider conflict. But the West are in it because, you know, we are being paid a lot of money by Zionists. There's a lot of money involved in the military-industrial complex. There's the big reset to think about. There's WHO involved. But when you look at the Zionist point of view of it, in particular the Zionist government which runs Israel, they do believe that we are, as Richard said, golems, which is basically we're beneath them. We're here, in their opinion and their mindset, to work for them and to do their work for them. People like the Palestinians that are in their land, which is their God-given right and their land that belongs to them, according to prophecy, they are like the Amaleks. They need to be exterminated because they are subhuman. So there is an element on the one hand of the big reset. Then there's an element of the amount of money that could be made from people like, you know, World Economic Forum, you know, the military-industrial complex, obviously corrupt politicians, and there's an abundance of them, a bountiful amount of them. And then, of course, you've got the crazy people, the Zionists, that believe that they have some divine right to control us and to look at them people as subhuman and slaughter them. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case in Ukraine. That's part of the world reset. That's part of the bigger agenda, which they are also involved in. That's not so much to do with their chosen land, their biblical texts and that. That's more to do with what we're talking about. We need to depopulate the world. We need to do this. We need to do that.
The Sabbatean Frankists, which, you know, allegedly stem from that Ukrainian area.
Yeah, but Zionism, I've come to realise, I've never been a fan of Zionism, but I've come to realise, in my opinion, Zionism is far more of a threat than anything else that's come before, including Nazism. And if you look from 1933 to 1945, the amount of life that was lost and the amount of effort that it took to bring Nazism to an end, I dread to think what it will take to bring Zionism to an end.
It still didn't manage to end it because quite a few of them, shall we say, disappeared to Ontario. Quite a few of them went back to Ukraine, and of course they've risen again through.
Well, let's be clear. You know, after 1945, 46, 47, the West realised that it liked a lot of Nazism. Nazism never went away. It's been integrated into modern Western politics.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just add something to that on a context of why this narrative leads right through what you've just said there with the Nazis, and obviously there is a Rothschild element to that as well. So 600,000 is the number they have specific. So watch out for this 600,000 letters. So there was apparently 600,000 Israelites that were displaced during the Exodus. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah. Clearly there isn't, but for every, that's what they believe, for every letter in the Torah, the 600,000 Jews were moved back to Israel. Apparently, I mean, I know these numbers aren't real, but this is the narrative. They have this 600,000 number. So when you follow this 600,000 number out and then in, back again, you realize that Nazism was just a part of this overall agenda to create a homeland for the Jews who are not actually Semitic Jews, they're Ashkenazim Jews, many of which are European Jews. And I'm not talking about the average people. People are being used. The Jews of everyday Jewish people are being used by this cult that goes right through. Nazism was a mechanism to move this forward and create a homeland from which they can then take over the Middle East and create the Solomon's Temple. This again goes back thousands of years. So what Lee was saying, James was saying, absolutely 600,000 in and out, and this is a narrative that goes way back, and that's why it's important to I believe and understand what they're trying to do. And Nazism is clearly just a mechanism of what we're seeing there. It's the mentality isn't any different. The labels are different.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, we've got about 5 minutes left. It's been rather a long one today. We're going to, and it's been brilliant. Let's move on to Elon Musk, Lee. What's he been up to?
Well, Elon Musk has basically made comment and reference to a law in the Republic of Ireland, which he says will kill free speech, kill democracy.
I agree with him.
So do I. And this is something we talked about previously on the show. The Republic of Ireland hate speech bill, which has not yet gone through, but it basically, we have one. Leo Varadkar's correct. He said this is, Ireland is not leading on this. Ireland is trailing and following up with this because we've already got a hate speech bill in the UK. We've got the internet, whatever it is, the protection bill. And
online
safety bill. Thank you, Richard. We got the online safety, and you can buy those.
That's for children, isn't it, Lee? And it only mentions children once.
That's the narrative that they want the public to think about. The reality is about the killing and reduction of free speech and those that want to speak out against government and against the narrative. But so what the Irish are doing, they've incorporated both things into this hate speech bill. And Elon Musk has come out on X, and we've spoken about this before, and it's a big news in Ireland. Elon Musk has now come in and said that this is an attack on democracy and free speech, freedom of speech, and therefore it's lifted this Irish debate up into an international level, which is why it was of interest.
Will we be hearing from Claire Daly on this, Richard? Will it?
All I know is I'm not sure who Claire Daly is. Who's Claire Daly?
The MEP.
The MEP who absolutely keeps slaughtering Ursula von der Leyen for her warmongering in not only Gaza but in Ukraine as well. She is quite fierce and very, very bright.
Okay, well, hopefully. I mean, all I know is from obviously the angle that I come from with Elon Musk, you've got everything there. Just be careful. As I said earlier, the whole Messiah, son of Joseph, the savior, he's just another one playing that character, in my opinion. And so he's jumped on that side of it. You've got to control both elements of it. Yes, obviously what he's saying is completely true. We need freedom of speech. We need freedom of, but look at who he's funded by. Qatar funded most of or much of his acquisition of X. X obviously has a lot of connotations to the sigil of Saturn and all of this kind of Kabbalistic stuff that he's pushing in the background with rainbows everywhere and no hide laws. He's part of it. He's just playing off the other side as much as the same as Trump is as well. So that's my take on him. Of course, he's right now, but his long-term plans. If you've got a platform where you can say whatever you want on, and it's all data and it's all recorded and it's all data mining and profiling you, I would just say one word: future crimes.
Yep. James, Rossi, Claire Daly and Mick Wallace, we're going to be hearing from them on this, aren't we?
I should think so, yes. Claire's very vocal. I've seen quite a few of her videos on social media where she's giving it to the European Parliament and the UN. I'll take me out after the young lady. Fair play to her. We've also had, talking about bills being passed to restrict people, it's gone kind of quietly under the radar, but I think it was a couple of days ago or last week. It was last week, sorry, was a bill put through that you know, we've had the campaign to boycott certain products like McDonald's, Starbucks and things like that. Can't do that anymore. If I put a post out now asking people to boycott certain shops or certain companies that are associated to it, I could be arrested for it.
James, let me just interrupt you there. Does that mean that Anthony Joshua can't turn around and say boycott white-only businesses again?
No, I think it's only covering this particular conflict, funnily enough, because obviously it's actually hurt. That boycotting thing has actually hurt the financial pockets of a lot of Zionists or people that are connected to Zionism and obviously connected to the state of Israel. So it's something had to be done. It's a bit like the shipping thing. Nobody's been killed there. There's been no injuries, but it's caused disruption. It's caused financial disruption. It's caused disruption to the Israeli war effort. So therefore, something had to be done about it. People being slaughtered, murdered, massacred, ethnic cleansing, genocide. Don't worry about that. That's fine. It doesn't cost any money.
It's all right, fellas. We understand.
Yeah, that's the attitude of the Western politicians.
Yep, lovely. Final thoughts, Lee. Over to you.
I think we've covered it all, really. I think what people should be aware of is that everything is connected. Everything goes back to the United Nations agenda for the 21st century. We're in Agenda 2030. Clearly stated in all of this, including the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome, is global war, World War III, in their view. They clearly on a depopulation exercise. This is not, again, it's written down. There's no need to guess. There's no need to make a leap of faith. It's all written down for you. What this is doing is setting up the world for World War III, the conditions that will cause a collapse of the food supply chain, and they're working very quickly towards that. And that's not to miss out on the fact that, you know, the asylum system is deliberately broken to allow vast numbers of people into the West, which will cause the other major plank of their operations and their writings, civil war, social unrest, ethnic and religious conflict.
Richard, final thoughts?
Absolutely, it's all connected. That'd be mine. And also another level deeper than that, it's just always okay, it's all connected, then why? In my opinion, why is this world to come? It's the Middle East, it's Solomon's Temple, and this is their world, a Kabbalistic world, which is the tree of life turned upside down. And also even looking to New Mexico, I'm looking into that at the moment, the underground there, because they believe in a world that's underneath us. So they won't be here to have to deal with the atomic war that they're
building their bunkers.
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to turn into a load of Morlocks, doesn't it, from the time machine? James Rossi, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think I'd like to leave the viewers to go away and think very carefully about what we talked about today and think about how they're going to vote in their relevant elections. I know it's not easy. There's always, problems with the people that you're voting for, because somewhere there's always a connection. But in the UK in particular, I'm going to go back to this. you need to be voting for anyone other than the red or the blue, because we need change. We need to do something. And I think that's the best way forward. If you haven't voted, go and vote for one of the other parties. If you have voted and you weren't going to vote for one of the other parties. You know, anything you vote for is a win, as long as it's not blue or red. So not voting is not a good option.
Yeah, absolutely. My final thoughts on this, with all the warmongering and the fear-mongering that is there to try and put, shall we say, your well-being down, because it does have a stress level on people. And I know that sometimes listening to this show, people go, oh, you know, I get so worried about this. All of these people are designed to try and keep you in a state of fear. You should only be fearful of one thing, that these people just want to cause death, destruction, and wars. If you're like the rest of us, you're on the side of peace and people getting along with each other, we'll be just fine. But it is time for us all to band together and start fighting as one for peace. I know that sounds crazy, fighting for peace. When a politician says it, what he means is let's go and bomb the crap out of somebody else for their various resources, and so that we can have power over you, have power over Lee, have power over Richard, have power over and the rest of the world. We just like to see the world get along and have a little bit of peace. Thank you very much if you are out there and you are watching this or listening to this on your way to work or on your way home or whatever. Where can people find you on your social media, Richard?
You can find me on X at WTAFRich, and iconic.com is where all my work goes every week. I have a show go out Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. called Classic.
Fantastic. Please go and check that out if you're interested in anything that Richard had to say there, because he looks at it from a different perspective and he looks at it from what they believe. So it is worth a look. James Rossi, where can people find you on your social media?
Yeah, you can find me on X at James Rossi, James RO 564-18288 or James Rossi 47 on TikTok. I'm also back on YouTube now, uploading some of the videos that we do from the news channel. So if you want a snip of one or two of the news channels to see what it's all about, please go and watch it. I'm sure you'll sign up afterwards. And Facebook, but I'm not a big fan of Facebook. Don't use it too much.
No, well, you can find this show on obviously the Frontline. If you go to the Frontline.army, sign up for the Uncensored newsletter. That would be great. And you can find this show on Patreon at The Real Truth 502. And if you want to donate there, that'd be absolutely great. Both of those things are completely free. Please go and check them out. Lee, we're normally joined at the Hip Buddy. Where will they find us on social? Where will they find you on social media?
Well, I really don't do social media that much. I do have an ex-Twitter account, but I use that mainly for seeing what's going on. You'll find me on here, the Frontline.
Oh, brilliant. And of course, you can find me on Twitter on Thornton WA 47373. Not so much on TikTok anymore because of the restrictions there. But you can also find me at The Real Truth on Telegram. We'll say goodbye in the round now. So it's good. We'll go to James, then to Richard, then to Lee. So it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from them.
Goodbye.
Bye. Goodbye.
The people have the power. Let us all
The tyrant class is stifling the truth.
Well, then sit down. We've heard your opinion.
The Truth and Network are distorting the truth. Only a handful truly stand for fact, reality, and justice. But it's time for change. It's time to bring everyone together with bite-sized, straight-up factual reporting on the WHO from a panel of contemporary journalists, each networked in their own field, and unlike others, unhacked, their integrity fully intact. War correspondents, political commentators,
they want us sick, compliant,
natural health advisors, and not to mention the amazing lineup of guests. A daily news show, a weekly roundup show to share with friends and family.
BBC One, the Pedor channel. Don't trust them.
An uncensored newsletter. All of this for free and aimed at one objective, using the truth to win the war.
Now we're going to turn to people who are on the front line.
Warriors, mate.
The Frontline.army. Together, we are strong.
You, the people, have the power. Let us all unite. Let us all unite.